Hi guys, hope you're doing well. We're going to be studying in Matthew chapter 2. We're going through another gospel account. As I said before and previously, that this is kind of second eyewitness, as it were. You have two eyewitness accounts of who Jesus is, that he's the Messiah, that he is the Savior of the world, and what actually took place. And that's why we're going to go through that and get a second testimony of that before we get into some of the other books. I think that'll be really beneficial for people who haven't studied this or haven't had time to go through it or new to the faith or whatever. So hopefully you're enjoying this. Uh, I love the book of Matthew, so hopefully you'll love it just as much or more. So anyway, so if you have your Bible, please pick it up and, like I said, like, subscribe if you like what we're doing, and share this with other people that you think it can benefit. I mean, there's so many people that just can't get out and go to Bible studies, or can't, or have never been in a Bible study and don't really know where to go or what's all related and so forth. This will help them in their study and their walk. At least I hope that's the goal. So anyway, let's start off. Let's start in chapter 2. So the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews? For we saw the star, or his star in the east, and have come to worship him." So these promised Magi were to come, and as they were to come in, they were to be a testimony to the people that of this age in which the Messiah was to come. And the whole world's kind of shaking up, like, what's going on here? Where are all these people from the east coming here? What are they talking about with this new king? Wait a minute. And it really shocked Herod. And Herod was really disturbed by this. And because a lot of them knew that these people from the east had been informed by Daniel. And because remember, Daniel was, as the Jews had gone into captivity in Babylon, these people in the east, what we would say modern day Babylon and Persia and so forth in that area, had been given this prophecies of Daniel, and they understood that there was a time frame for the coming of Messiah, and we see that from Daniel chapter 9. And so they knew that there's an approximate time frame from the decree to rebuild the temple until the time of the coming of the Messiah. So they knew that it still hadn't reached the exact time frame, but they knew that, hey, this is a pretty important time frame that we need to be looking at, significant. And I'm sure that influenced these people, but also the new stars in heaven. They're stargazers. They understood astrology and this kind of stuff. And there must have been some astronomical event that was so significant that they were willing to pack up everything and come all the way to Jerusalem, which wasn't, a simple task. I mean, you had to have the ability to travel and enough people and protection against bandits and so forth, and food to sustain you, money to sustain you, travel to a distance in hope of seeing something significant that you were seeing as a relation to this astronomical event, that something on earth was happening in corresponding with this event, knowing that God controls all things in the heavens, as it were, the heavens declare the majesty of the Lord. Well, in the same way, they understood that, and I think they were influenced by the writings of Daniel and and others. But so they weren't, ignorant of the things that were happening in Jerusalem and in Judaism. It is interesting that this all is taking place in Judea, and Judea is, interesting what's going on today. So keep an eye on Judea and the whole annexation of that. Going back to Joel, not to be off topic, but it is important. It is significant. So keep that in mind. And as we're jumping back to the Old Testament a lot in the book of Matthew, it is important to remember these things as well, that we live in very supernatural times as well. When you start hearing about the annexation of Judea, Jerusalem's already been announced as being the capital of Jerusalem, accepted by more nations. Judea is the next one, and that'll be the significant one because of the timing. So we need to be good stewards and aware of that as well. Like Jesus said, be looking, be ready, right? So we need to be looking, be ready. But anyway, so here, just like these Magi were looking and they were ready, they were looking for the signs of this Messiah's coming. We need to be looking for his second coming. And that's why I'm referencing that. So when you get a chance, read through Joel chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. You'll see where it talks about at the time they restored Judea and Jerusalem. That's the time he'll call the nations down to the judgment, what we would call Armageddon, and the Valley of Megiddo. But we know that the time of tribulation is beginning. has begun. But we know that that'll be from the decree to rebuild the temple in Daniel chapter 9. But ultimately, we got to see that these events are going to happen first, which will be played out, that Israel, who's now returned, all these things will also be picked up with the decree to annex Judea. So, like these magi, we need to be wise, and we need to be looking. And they were willing to travel a long distance across the whole desert, and the Jews are sitting right there, and they weren't willing to travel just a few miles, as it were, to Bethlehem to see what's going on and see if the Messiah, the promised Messiah, because they knew the prophecies as well. And the fact that they weren't willing to even look at that, and realize that they're right there in the neighborhood, they could have traveled there and see this amazing event that the promised Messiah, born of a virgin, was taking place right now, and and saw the angels and so forth that we're going to see that will present themselves. They weren't, that we've all become so familiar with in Christianity. When we do the plays and all the stuff, you go to them and you see the shepherds and the angels on high who come and give their the angelic announcement of the coming of the Messiah, the birth of the Messiah. It is quite amazing when you think about it. So we see that in Luke and so forth. But in any case, this is taking place. The Magi are coming. They come into the city. It's not like in the books where they say there's 3 people. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it was actually quite a bit more than that. I'm thinking of a verse here. I want to say that in verse. We'll come to it. Isaiah, keep your finger in Isaiah. We're going to come to it. The reason why I think there's so many of them, it's in Isaiah chapter 60, I believe. So we'll come to that. Yeah, that's something I definitely want to bring up. It is significant. So we'll put our finger in chapter 60 and we'll come to it here real quick. But anyway, we keep reading. He says, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Gathering together all his chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet. It says, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of them shall come forth a ruler, who will shepherd my people Israel. Now this is in Micah chapter 5. This is one you probably want to definitely mark. It is a significant prophecy. It's one that you often will show to people as evidence and proof of that Jesus is the Messiah. So those motorcycles are kind of loud, aren't they? My goodness. So we'll look at. It's a small book, but it's an important one. So we'll jump over here real quick. So Micah 5:2. There we go. Micah 5:2. And it says, if you get a chance to take a look at that, it says, but as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, for from you one will go forth for me to be ruler of Israel. His going forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. He's eternal. He's clearly God. He's not from earth. He's from heaven. Therefore, he will give them up until the time when she will be, who is in labor, has born a child. Pretty amazing. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel, and he shall rise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will remain, because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. I mean, it's going to be a global faith, a global religion in him, one that's truly believing and trusting in the one who was promised to come from eternity. He's clearly God who's coming. So all these things are alluding to the deity of Jesus Christ, his promise coming, and Herod sees this and is like really shocked and really upset, because his throne's going to be, upset. You would think that he'd be like, well, hey, let the Lord's will be done. He would much rather have, God come and establish his kingdom than me have my little earthly rule here. No, he was so fixed, like most people, they had to have their power and their influence and so forth. So he goes on to say, he says, then Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time of the star appeared. So we know it's a star of some sort. And he says, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. And when you have found him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Clearly, they understood that this is God who's coming, at least at the time. Otherwise, what you'd be worshiping man, which would be, obviously a sin. And Jews weren't going to do that, even though Herod, I'm sure, understood some of this stuff. He was probably out of his normal realm of context. And he goes on to say, after hearing the king, they went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Just like us, we should be exceedingly joyful when we see the Lord's signs of his coming. We shouldn't be in trepidation and fearful and all this stuff. Like you see some people kind of, they're almost like, they see people talk about prophecy and the fulfillment of it and the return of Jesus Christ and all this stuff. They're like, they kind of, repulse a little bit and fearful, within the church. And it's like, no, you should be absolutely exceedingly joyful, just like these magi. They were enormously joyful over what they were seeing. This child that they knew was coming, so special that it was a God man who they were willing to worship. He says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. After coming into the house, so he's no longer in a manger. By the time they got there, he was in a house, or he was in a dwelling. And they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. They didn't worship her; they worshipped him. So again, they worshipped him. And it's clearly an element of belief that he is the God man. Then opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now this is where we're going to jump to Isaiah 60 real quick. So let's jump to Isaiah 60 verses 6. Very fascinating. You'll find this pretty interesting. A multitude of camels will cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all those from Sheba will come. So it's a lot. It's not 3. It's a covering. So that's why I think the whole city was in an uproar. It's like, who are all these? We're being invaded here, or what? What's going on? And I'm sure the king was like, who are all these people? And why are they coming here? And are they intending evil, or what's going on? This isn't normal. And it was probably just a massive amount of these guys traveling in a caravan for security and safety. And it says all these from Sheba will come, and they will bring gold and frankincense, and will bear good news of the praises of the Lord. When the good news obviously was the sign that the Messiah had come, and they were coming to worship him. And this was simply rejected overall by the King Herod and his people around him. But even when he assembled the scribes and so forth around you guessed that they would have mentioned this to other people, and it would have got out, hey, we got the potential for the Messiah to be born. And then you look at the Daniel's prophecy and the time and all this stuff, you'd be like, this could very well be true. And that apparently doesn't seem to be in the text that happened. But it is amazing that this prophecy is given when Isaiah roughly 700 years before, and it's talking about these ones who are going to come from the east, and that they would bring good tidings and good news, which is absolutely true, that the Messiah had been born. Pretty amazing. It doesn't get any better than that. If the Messiah is coming, wow, your redemption and everything else, time for a new covenant and everything else. So if you get a chance, you can check that out. Isaiah chapter 60, verses 6. It says, I thought you might find that very fascinating. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. So now they're traveling all the way back. Pretty amazing. They come all this way to see the birth of Christ. Again, a prophecy given by God 700 years before, fulfilled in the book of Isaiah. Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and said, get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Out of Egypt I call my son. We see that in Hosea 11:1. So we won't go back and look at it, but it is a reference to that. If you get a chance, you can look at that, Hosea 11:1. And it's a reference to his calling his son out of Egypt, which in fact did occur. and he did this through Joseph and his mother Mary. As they, Herod eventually dies, he calls him, says, okay, now you can return. And he goes and settles in Nazareth, and that's why he's called a Nazarene and so forth. It says, then when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, and from 2 years old and under, according to the time which had been determined for the Magi. Then you see from that, when he was asking how old he was, or when they saw the star, he was already contemplating in his mind evil. He knew that, okay, wait a minute, how long did you see the star? Okay, then this child who's being born has got to be about, a year, maybe 6 months you've been traveling. Well, we'll just be safe and go out to 2 years. He was already contemplating in his mind the evil intentions. That's how bad he was. He already knew he was going to be committing a horrible act, which was prophesied in Jeremiah 31. So we'll maybe look at that. He says, vicinity from 2 years and old and under, according to the time which had been determined from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. Again, talking about the children being murdered and killed. So we'll look at Jeremiah 31. So Jeremiah 31, verses 15, which is interesting because actually the New Covenant's talked about in Jeremiah. Right in that same vicinity here, which is very, very interesting. And Jeremiah 31 is also talks about the coming of the New Covenant. So the New Covenant that would come is in Jeremiah 31 through 34 roughly, which, if you think about it, you get Jeremiah 31:15, which is also talking about the time in which the Messiah and this death of these people. So 15 says, thus says the Lord, the voice is heard in Ramah, lamentations and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children, and she refuses to be comforted for her children because there are no more. He prophesied this death that was going to occur, this sacrifice of innocence for an attempt by Satan to murder the Messiah. I think it was Satan behind it, obviously working through Herod, one of his minions. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother and came to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee and came and lived in the city of Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene, which probably the closest thing you can find for that would be in Judges 13, verse 7. Judges 13, verse 7 kind of talks about, remember, Solomon. That's probably the only indication where I can find anything in there where it's talking about this reference. Just see if I can get over here real quick. Yeah, it's 13 verse 7, I think it is. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I thought. Yeah, it goes, but he said to me, behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, nor any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazarene to God from the womb to the day of his death. So that's the only place that you can find that. Now, is that alluding to that? Is it talking about that? Is it a double prophecy, the one of Samuel, but also the coming of the birth of the Messiah? That's the only way you can kind of look at that, I think. It's the only reference to I found. But again, you see all these minute little prophecies that have to be fulfilled. And that's why when it talks about, the testimony of Jesus testified to by the law and the prophets, that's not just an insignificant claim. It's pretty important when you think about it. It's pretty amazing. Who could fulfill all these little intricate details that he has no control over. That if he was just a man, he would have no control over those things, like the prophecy in Jeremiah, the death of these little children, weeping and mourning. It's one of those things you would read over and not even understand it, but yet God, to the minute details, fulfills that through Herod, who's just does evil, but he knew the intentions of this person and his evil that was in his heart, and how it would fulfill that. Or the Magi who's coming, as we see in Isaiah 60, verse 6, or this Nazarene one that we see in Judges 3:13, verse 7. All these minute details, Isaiah 7:14, how all this is interrelated. And we'll see this throughout the gospel. And that basically is a great proof that Jesus is the Messiah, and there could be nobody else. And there can't be somebody else who would come later, because again, the Messiah would have to come and die before the destruction of the second temple, according to Daniel chapter 9. So, you start thinking about these things. Messiah had to come at the time he did. He had to fulfill the things that he fulfilled. And literally, we see it being lived out and fulfilled in the prophecies given throughout Matthew. It's quite beautiful, and I think that's why that's why Matthew is such an amazing, wonderful book to read as a Christian. And that's why I think the people, when they're putting it together, put that one at the front for a reason. So that you could reference back to the Old Testament so much, and there was so much richness there. And it's just quite beautiful. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying this study, and we'll just pick it up and continue on from there. But hopefully you're just finding this very fascinating and enjoyable as well. And I hope you grow in your love and appreciation for God's Word, His recorded Word, the Bible, but more importantly, for the living Word, Jesus Christ, who is truly the one who come and died and rose again for our salvation. And it's by that belief that we're saved. You're brought into this new covenant, this new family, and you have new brothers, new sisters, new mothers, new fathers, new relatives, as it were, spiritually speaking, a new heritage, because you've died and you've been born again. You become a new creation, and by the spiritual rebirth, you've in essence inherited a whole new family tree, family line. So it's quite beautiful. So anyway, God bless. Be safe. Keep looking up. Follow what God says in His Word, and study it and look at it and absorb it and pray for wisdom and guidance. And God will speak to you through His Word, and give you a chance to grow in the faith, and just seek for Him to move in your life and to help you be a part of those things that He wants you to accomplish and do. So anyway, God bless. Be safe, and we'll pick up in chapter 3. Maybe we'll see pretty soon. So anyway, God bless.